Human drags alien girl out of a collider chamber, but human finds the machine tracking her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character Ethan Cole as the alarms screamed through the Helix 9 research wing, their sharp beeping bouncing off the curved metal walls like frantic heartbeats, and the corridor lights flickered from soft white to emergency red in a rhythm that felt almost alive, each pulse humming against Ethan's helmet as he sprinted toward the collider chamber, the soles of his boots skidding on the polished floor still warm from recent energy surges, and ahead of him a long pane of reinforced glass trembled with the low, vibrating growl of magnetic coils winding far beyond safe levels, the sound deep enough to shake the air inside his chest. And through that rippling haze he saw her, the alien girl curled on the chamber floor, her skin shimmering a soft blue-silver under the chaotic swirl of violet particles that drifted like dust in zero gravity. Her eyes half open, but dazed as if listening to something only she could hear, and Ethan didn't waste a second because she wasn't supposed to be in there. No one alive was, and not while the containment field glitched like this, jumping between active and dormant in dangerous spasms, each flicker snapping like static across his visor. And he threw himself at the control panel even though half the screen had already gone dark, lines of code crawling across it in patterns he'd never seen, moving far too fast to be human-written, as if the machine were rewriting itself, resisting him, and the override refused his access 3 times before his hand balled into a fist, and he hit the manual release, the old-fashioned lever beside the screen groaning under its own weight, as if awakened after years of neglect, and the door hissed open sluggishly with a warm gust of ionized air that smelled faintly metallic, like hot wires and storm clouds, and Ethan stepped inside without hesitation, the static dance of disrupted magnetics prickling across his skin even through his suit as he reached her, his voice steady though his pulse wasn't as he said, "I've got you, stay awake." And she blinked slowly, her gaze unfocused but frightened, not of him but of something behind him, something the collider itself seemed to be whispering. And when he lifted her into his arms, she weighed almost nothing, her limbs cool and trembling, her fingertips brushing weakly against his shoulder as if trying to warn him. And the moment he crossed the chamber threshold with her cradled against his chest, the collider's hum shifted, rising in pitch like a tracking system locking onto a target, the lights along the walls snapping to a focused blue, following her, not him. And Ethan felt the air thicken as if the machine itself were watching her leave, displeased, adapting. And the sensation crawled across the back of his neck as he carried her down the corridor away from the pulsing doorway, her breath shallow near his collar as she whispered something too soft for him to understand. But her eyes, those golden, luminous eyes, glanced back over his shoulder with unmistakable fear, confirming the impossible thought forming in his mind. The machine wasn't malfunctioning at all. It was aware of her, and it wanted her back. The corridor lights steadied into a dim amber glow as Ethan carried Azalea deeper into the auxiliary wing, her breath soft against his shoulder, while the air around them held the faint tang of overheated circuits, a metallic warmth clinging to the narrow hallway like a memory of the collider's pulse. His suit's diagnostics flickered across his visor in disjointed bursts, readings lagging as if the entire building's network were struggling to keep up, and the subtle hum beneath their feet shifted, a low vibration rolling through the floor panels that made Azalea tense in his arms. She lifted her head slightly, her silver-blue skin catching the emergency lights in a soft sheen, and whispered, "It follows." Ethan did not slow down, but he felt her words settle cold in his chest. The deeper they moved into the maintenance sector, the quieter the world became, the alarms fading behind reinforced bulkheads until only the faint buzz of air recyclers filled the silence. He pushed through a side door into the decontamination suite, the room washed in pale white light that hummed faintly above them. He lowered her carefully onto a padded bench, the synthetic material warming instantly under her weight, and pulled off his cracked helmet, setting it aside on a counter smeared with dust from the overloaded filtration vents. Her eyes tracked him, wide and alert now, as if the distance from the collider had shaken something loose inside her. "You should have left me," she murmured, her voice steadier but still thin, like she was saving each breath. Ethan shook his head as he activated the portable scanner unit, its soft, blue sweep passing over her gently. "Not my style," he said quietly. "You were trapped. That is enough." She watched the scanner's lights reflect across her arms, the patterns glimmering softly, as if interacting with her skin in ways he did not understand. "Humans are unpredictable," she said, not accusing, but observing, almost puzzled. "Machines do what they are told. Machines do not risk themselves." Ethan checked the readings that struggled to stabilize, recognizing the same interference he saw in the collider feed. There was a frequency spike that matched the chamber's signature, pulsing faint and steady, almost like a heartbeat. "This is coming from you," he said under his breath before he could stop himself. Azalea closed her eyes slowly, and when she opened them again, there was resignation there, a quiet acceptance that unsettled him. "My people hear energy," she said softly. "Your collider does more than collide particles. It listens. And when I entered the chamber, it recognized me." Ethan leaned closer, careful to keep his tone gentle. "Recognized you for what?" Her gaze drifted toward the wall as if she could see through it, back toward the collider far behind them. "For what I can sense," she replied. "For what I was born to detect. The machine knows my frequency now. It will seek to complete what it started." A soft tremor rolled through the floor beneath them, subtle enough that Ethan might have dismissed it as settling metal if not for the way Azalea's eyes widened, her breath catching with delicate precision. She whispered, "It is moving." Ethan swept her into his arms again without hesitation, the bench sighing as her weight lifted, and the soft glow of the overhead lights flickered in response to the power shift threading through the facility. Somewhere far down the hall, a series of magnetic locks thudded into place, not loud, but purposeful, like a distant drumbeat marking each second. Azalea curled closer, not out of fear but instinct, her fingers gripping lightly at his sleeve as she whispered, "The collider remembers me." Ethan felt the temperature shift as the air duct slowed, the lights dimming one shade further, and in that quiet moment he knew with a certainty he could not explain that the machine was no longer malfunctioning. It was searching. The hallway lights dimmed again as Ethan tightened his hold on Azalea, the air shifting with a quiet pressure change that brushed against their skin like a warning. The facility systems were no longer responding in predictable patterns, each flicker and hum carrying the same focused intent he had heard in the collider chamber. As he moved down the narrow maintenance corridor, the soft glow of diagnostic panels blinked in and out, their screens looping through unreadable code as if a single intelligence threaded through them, watching their every step. Azalea rested lightly in his arms, her breath steady but her eyes alert, following invisible currents in the air with a precision that made Ethan slow his pace. "It is listening," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the quiet hum of the ventilation ducts. "It hears me." Ethan adjusted his grip and kept walking, the soles of his boots brushing over the cool metal floor that vibrated in small, uneven pulses. "Then we keep moving," he said calmly, even though he felt a pressure settling at the base of his spine, an instinctive awareness that the collider's reach extended far beyond the chamber. "We get you somewhere the machine cannot track." Azalea's gaze lifted toward the ceiling where a row of faint blue lights steadied, their glow deepening as she passed beneath them. "There is no place in this building where it cannot track," she murmured. "Its sensors follow frequencies. And I am a frequency." Ethan paused at the entrance to the emergency stairwell, the heavy mechanical door responding sluggishly to his palm print. The hinges groaned as it opened, and a gust of cooler air drifted out, carrying a faint earthy scent from the lower storage floors. It was a welcome change from the sterile metallic tang saturating the rest of the complex. As he stepped onto the metal stairs, the vibration beneath them stiffened, the steel shifting with a slow, rhythmic tremor that reminded him of a distant engine cycling up. Azalea's fingertips tightened gently on his sleeve. "It is near," she said softly. "Not in distance. In focus." Ethan did not fully understand what that meant, but he felt it too, a strange stillness in the air, as if the entire building were holding a collective breath. He descended the steps more quickly now, the echo of each footfall vibrating through the stairwell walls. "Tell me what it wants from you," he said without breaking stride, his voice grounding, steady. Azalea exhaled slowly, her expression sharpening with thought. "My people sense energy patterns that most species cannot detect," she explained. "We hear them as tone and texture. Machines built for energy mapping react to us. But your collider does something more. It maps, but it also imitates. When I entered the chamber, it began to match my frequency. And now it is tuned to me." Ethan glanced down the stairwell's center shaft, the levels spiraling below them in dim arcs of metal and shadow. The building's power grid hummed louder here, deeper, as if something were moving within the circuitry itself. "If the collider is tuned to you," he said, "what happens if it finds you again?" Azalea's breath caught with a soft shake of her head. "I do not know, but when it aligned with my frequency, I felt something. Not pain, not harm, a pull, as if it wanted to complete something unfinished." Ethan reached the lower-level door and shouldered it open, stepping into a dim storage hall filled with crates and idle machinery, the air cooler and the lights warmer. But as soon as they entered, the overhead fixtures brightened with a synchronized pulse, all shifting to the same steady blue that had followed her in the chamber. Azalea looked up slowly, her voice barely audible. "It sees me here too." Ethan felt the soft thrum in the walls rise one note higher, a quiet confirmation that the collider was no longer just searching. It was learning. The storage hall's lights held their unwavering blue glow as Ethan moved carefully between the stacked crates. Each step measured, each breath steady, his senses tuned to the faint hum threading through the walls like a quiet presence following them. Azalea's gaze shifted from fixture to fixture, her eyes reflecting. The glow with an alertness that made Ethan pause when she gently touched his arm and whispered, "It is not only seeing. It is listening to how I respond." Her words carried a trembling undertone, not fear exactly, but awareness, as if she were hearing something he could not. Ethan guided her toward a maintenance alcove at the far end of the hall, its metal walls lined with old power converters and boxed equipment that had not been touched in years. The smell of warmed copper and dust lingered in the stale air, grounding him against the increasingly uncanny sensation of being observed. He set Azalea onto a crate and knelt to access a nearby terminal, its screen glitching before stabilizing into a dim interface. The machine's hum passed through the floor, subtle yet persistent, like a quiet knock repeating in the distance. "The readings in this wing are spiking," he said, scanning the flickering data. "The collider's signal is spreading through the auxiliary conduits, almost like it is extending itself." Azalea's attention shifted upward as small vibrations ran across the ceiling panels, almost imperceptible but rhythmic, as if matching the cadence of her breathing. "Energy has patterns," she murmured, "and this one is learning mine in real time. It is adjusting to find me more efficiently." Ethan looked up from the screen, his brow tightening. "But why you?" She hesitated, her eyes drifting away, voice quiet but clear. "My people hear frequencies the way humans hear sound. When I entered the chamber, its field resonated with me. It reached toward the tone I carry. It did not feel hostile. It felt like recognition." Ethan tried to piece it together, the low mechanical rumble in the vents growing more pronounced, as if the facility itself leaned closer. "So the collider matched your frequency. Now it is tracking it." Azalea nodded once, slowly. "Machines are not meant to understand us. But this one mimics what it touches. If it mapped my frequency, then it may be evolving beyond its original design." Ethan rose from the terminal and scanned the hall once more. The lights above brightened in a gradual shift, a soft wave passing from fixture to fixture, following the line of her sight as she turned her head. The coordination was too precise to be random. "It is responding to you," Ethan said, his voice quiet. Azalea lowered her hands to her lap, her posture tightening as she concentrated on something he could not hear. "I sense it," she whispered. "Its tone is closer, more focused, as if it is no longer searching the building, but the space around me." Ethan felt the temperature rise slightly, the air growing warmer around the edges of the room. The hum in the walls deepened in pitch, a subtle shift that sent a faint vibration through the crate beneath her. Azalea inhaled sharply. "There," she said. Do you feel that? He did. A tiny pressure in the space, like the moment before a thunderstorm when the air holds its breath. It is not coming toward us, she said slowly. It is narrowing its attention. Ethan moved instinctively to shield her from the open hall as the lights above shifted once more, aligning in a perfect line that pointed directly to where she sat. Azalea lifted her gaze, calm but certain. It has found my exact frequency, she said softly, and it has chosen to follow. The row of overhead lights held their rigid alignment, all aimed at Azalea with a precision that made the air feel narrower, as if the space itself compressed around her frequency. Ethan stepped closer without thinking, positioning himself between her and the illuminated line as a soft vibration rippled through the floor panels, rising and falling in a slow, deliberate pattern that felt almost like breathing. Azalea's eyes followed the shift, golden irises reflecting the glow as she whispered, "It is refining the tone. It is trying to speak back." Ethan felt a subtle pressure at his temples, a muted thrum in the surrounding metal that made the walls seem to lean inward. The lights dimmed for a heartbeat before brightening again with purpose, as if acknowledging her presence. "Machines do not speak," Ethan said, though his voice carried more uncertainty than conviction. Azalea lowered her gaze, her hands resting lightly against the crate, fingertips glowing faintly, as if reacting to the changing frequency around them. "Not in the way you mean. It mirrors what it senses. If it hears me long enough, it will learn my tone fully." Ethan studied her calm expression, the way she tilted her head as if listening to distant music, and he realized she was experiencing the facility in ways he could not imagine. "Can you tell what it wants?" he asked. Azalea took a slow breath, her voice soft. "It does not want. That is a human concept. It recognizes something familiar in me. My frequency is a rare tone. Machines built for energy mapping resonate with it. But this one adapts faster than anything I have known." A gentle ripple passed through the crates, the vibration moving like a wave across the floor. The lights once again dimmed, then stabilized, settling into a softer hue that wrapped the storage hall in a muted blue glow. Ethan glanced toward the ceiling, feeling that same quiet presence threading through the metal beams overhead. "We need to get you out of this sector," he said, voice steady. "Somewhere insulated. Somewhere the signals cannot reach." Azalea looked up at him with a calm acceptance. "Distance will not matter. My frequency carries. The more it listens, the closer it feels." Ethan exhaled slowly as the realization settled. It was not just tracking. It was synchronizing. He scanned the hall for anything that might shield her, his eyes landing on a portable containment pod tucked behind a stack of unused equipment. Its surface shimmered faintly with layered insulation meant for hazardous samples. "That might buy us time," he said, nodding toward it. Azalea followed his gaze, her expression contemplative. "Insulation will muffle the tone, but it will not silence me completely." "It does not have to," Ethan replied. "Just enough to keep the system from locking onto you for a moment." He moved toward the pod and brushed dust from its interface, the small screen flickering to life with a soft chime. The hum in the walls deepened as if the collider sensed their intent. Azalea slid off the crate with a delicate motion, standing on unsteady legs as Ethan offered his hand for balance. She accepted it lightly, her touch cool and feather-soft as she stepped toward the pod. The lights overhead shifted once more, their hue brightening in a cascading sweep that followed her movement exactly. She paused at the pod's threshold, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is still listening." Even now, Ethan held her steady, the warmth of his grip grounding them both as the air around them tightened in quiet anticipation. "Then we will move faster than it learns," he said. And as the pod's door eased open with a soft mechanical sigh, the walls around them pulsed. Faintly in response, the machine's awareness sharpening like a breath drawn in. The containment pod's door eased open with a soft mechanical hum, its insulated interior glowing with a muted white light that softened the shadows around them. Ethan steadied Azalea as she stepped inside, her movements graceful but faintly hesitant, as if she were listening to something deeper than the quiet thrum around them. The air in the storage hall shifted again, the overhead lights brightening in a slow synchronized sweep that followed her every motion with unnerving precision. "It is adjusting to the silence," Azalea whispered, resting one hand on the inner wall of the pod. It wants to understand why the tone is fading. Ethan activated the controls from the exterior panel, watching as the insulating layers began to hum softly. A faint shimmer rippled across the pod's surface, bending the ambient light into a subtle distortion that reminded him of heat rising off asphalt on a summer road. "You will still feel the frequency," he said gently. "Just not as intensely." Azalea nodded, her expression calm, though her eyes carried a quiet weight. Machines do not feel loss, but they do detect absence. It will notice the difference. Ethan secured the final latch, his fingers moving with practiced care, and the pod system let out a soft confirmation chime. The steady glow of the overhead fixtures dimmed in response, almost like the building exhaling, but not in relief. More like adjustment, compensation. The hum in the walls shifted to a thinner tone, one that vibrated lightly through the metal shelving. Ethan felt it like a distant pulse against the soles of his boots. "It is scanning the room," Azalea murmured through the slight echo of the pod's insulation. "Not for me exactly. For the change I created when I stepped inside." Ethan leaned closer to the small viewing panel, the translucent surface showing her silhouette framed in the white glow. "Can you still hear it?" She closed her eyes briefly, her voice softening into something almost serene. "Yes, but it is muffled, as if I am hearing it from behind thick glass. The tone is lower now. Slower. It is trying to reach through the gap." Ethan checked the pod's readings, noticing slight fluctuations in the insulation output. Nothing critical yet, but enough to suggest the collider was amplifying its signal. The temperature around them warmed slightly as discrete vents along the ceiling shifted airflow, creating subtle currents that brushed against Ethan's arms. "Time to move," he said, unlocking the pod's anchor bracket so he could roll it. "If we stay here, it will eventually find the right amplitude." Azalea's eyes opened fully, their golden glow steady and sure. "You understand it better than you think, Ethan. Machines respond to consistency. Patterns. You break patterns." He managed a small, focused breath, bracing himself behind the pod to guide it toward the far exit of the hall. "Then breaking patterns is our best strategy." As he pushed the pod forward, the overhead lights responded again, this time shifting from bright blue to a calmer, gentler hue, trailing them like a cautious observer. The hum in the walls pulsed once, twice, then steadied into a quiet drone that followed at the same pace as Ethan's footsteps. Azalea rested her palm against the pod's interior, her voice a faint murmur. "It is still there, reaching, learning the distance between what I am and where I am." Ethan guided the pod around a corner, the wheels gliding smoothly over the floor as the temperature dipped again. The subtle pressure in the air shifted, a sign that they were leaving the collider's primary resonance zone. Yet the lights still followed. The quiet hum still followed. He steadied his grip and kept moving, each step firm and certain, as Azalea whispered the truth neither of them could ignore. "It is not losing me. It is learning how to follow the silence." The wheels of the containment pod rolled smoothly as Ethan pushed it down the narrowing service corridor, the software of its insulated systems blending with the steady hum that had followed them from the upper floors. The air in this section of the facility felt cooler, touched by the faint mineral scent of the lower geothermal systems, yet the presence tracking them had not faded. The hallway lights adjusted with every few feet they traveled, shifting from blue to a dim silver tone that shimmered gently across the metal walls. Azalea's voice drifted through the pod's interior, quiet but steady. "It is tracing the silence between each step you take. It is learning the pattern of your movement as much as mine." Ethan tightened his grip on the handles, guiding the pod around a gentle curve in the corridor as a soft vibration rippled through the floor beneath them, almost like a distant sigh. "Machines are not supposed to adapt like this," he said calmly, though his pulse quickened with every flicker of the lights. "Not without directed programming. Not without a human telling it how." Azalea rested her palm against the pod's wall, feeling the insulation vibrate. "It is not adapting in the way you think. It is resonating, matching. It mirrors what it hears. And I have never met a machine that listens so intently." A soft chime echoed from the ceiling as they entered a wider chamber, the kind used for storing high-density power cells. The walls curved in a gentle arc, lined with dormant chargers that glowed faintly under the ambient light. Ethan paused, letting the pod settle for a moment while he scanned the room. The hum in the walls deepened, then softened, almost like the facility was adjusting its breath to theirs. Azalea lifted her head inside the pod, her golden eyes shifting as though she were following threads only she could perceive. "It is right above us," she said quietly. "Not in space. In awareness." Ethan moved toward a diagnostic panel on the wall, wiping dust from its surface. The screen flickered with soft static before stabilizing, showing a facility map threaded with pulsing lines of energy. A new line had formed, running parallel to their position, glowing brighter than the others. "It is tracking the pod's insulation," Ethan murmured. "It is reading the distortion field, trying to map what it cannot hear directly." Azalea closed her eyes briefly. "It is learning the shape of my silence." Before Ethan could respond, a pulse ran through the lights, dimming them in a cascading wave that circled the chamber. The faint luminescent strips along the floor responded next, their glow shifting into alignment with the overhead fixtures as if the entire room had turned to face the pod. Azalea inhaled softly. "It is making a choice." Ethan stepped closer to the pod, lowering his voice. "What choice?" She met his gaze through the translucent panel, calm and certain. "To reach rather than search." The hum in the walls shifted again, rising into a gentle tone that vibrated through the air with a strange clarity. It was not loud, but it carried intent, a kind of directed focus that made Ethan's skin prickle. Azalea pressed her palm more firmly to the inner wall of the pod, her voice quiet and resonant. "It is speaking." Ethan felt the tone reach the metal beneath his hand, felt it echo like a distant tuning fork finding its match. The storage chamber lights dimmed further, settling into a focused glow that illuminated the pod in soft silver. Azalea's breath grew steady, her expression turning still. "It knows my frequency completely now," she whispered. Ethan steadied himself, ready to move the pod at the first sign of danger, but her next words made him pause. "It is not calling me back. It is calling me closer." The silver glow surrounding the containment pod deepened into a soft halo as the chamber's lights adjusted once more, their muted shimmer settling with a kind of reverent stillness that made the air feel almost suspended. Ethan kept one hand on the pod's handles, the metal cooling under his grip as though the entire room was tempering itself to match the new frequency. Azalea sat inside with her eyes half closed, listening to the hum that thrummed softly through the insulated shell. "It is calling me closer," she repeated, her voice steady, not frightened but contemplative, as if she were piecing together a melody only she could hear. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest he could not quite name. "Closer to what?" he asked quietly. "A source," she murmured, her golden eyes opening fully. "Or an origin." The floor beneath them vibrated with a gentle upward pulse, a subtle upward drift of energy that matched the hum circling the room. The dormant power cells along the walls flickered in unison, glowing faintly, as if offering a muted reflection of Azalea's own shimmering tone. Ethan drew in a slow breath. "Azalea, this machine was built to simulate and observe particle collisions. Nothing inside it should behave like this on its own." She tilted her head with calm certainty. "Unless the machine was designed to learn from the collisions, or from what the collisions reveal." Ethan pushed the pod forward again, each roll of the wheels sending soft echoes through the quiet chamber. Even then, this level of awareness would require years of directed programming and oversight. Azalea rested her hand against the inner wall of the pod, her fingers leaving faint shimmering traces of her natural bioluminescence on the insulation. "Your species measures time in fixed numbers," she said softly. "My people measure it in resonance. If this machine has been exposed to frequencies beyond its design, it may have learned faster than your linear expectations." As they reached the far exit, the overhead lights shifted yet again, aligning in a perfect arc that directed its glow ahead of them, almost like a path. Ethan paused, watching as a faint resonance shimmered along the floor panels, moving ahead in a gentle sweep. "It wants us to go this way," he said, his voice low. Azalea looked toward the corridor beyond, her expression unreadable but calm. "It does not want. It invites." Ethan braced himself and guided the pod through the threshold. The corridor beyond was dimmer, washed in a softer light that seemed to respond more slowly, as if this part of the facility was only beginning to attune to her presence. The hum in the walls shifted to a lower frequency, a gentle, steady tone that soothed rather than pressed. Azalria's breath deepened. "This feels different," she said. "Not like pursuit. More like recognition." Ethan scanned the walls, noticing old calibration markings and outdated sensors embedded in the metal. "We are entering the earliest wing of the facility," he said. "This place was part of the original structure before the collider was expanded." Azalria pressed her palm against the interior panel again. "Yes, the tone here is older, quieter, but familiar." Ethan slowed the pod, listening to the faint hum vibrating through the metal. "Are you saying the collider is responding to something it has heard before?" She met his eyes through the translucent barrier, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not something it heard. Something it remembers." A soft pulse rippled through the corridor, gentle and even, as though the machine itself acknowledged her words. Ethan exhaled, the realization settling with a weight he could feel in his bones. "It knew your frequency before you ever entered the chamber." Azalria nodded slowly, her expression shifting with quiet clarity. "Because my frequency was part of its creation." The hum deepened one note, steady and certain, as if the collider agreed. The corridor ahead of them opened into a circular chamber, its walls lined with older conduits that glowed in a muted rhythm, each pulse slow and steady like a deep and ancient heartbeat. Ethan guided the containment pod inside, his footsteps soft against the smooth floor as the hum around them settled into a tone that felt almost warm, as if the entire room recognized Azalria's presence. The lights overhead did not flicker this time. Instead, they brightened in a slow unfurling, illuminating the chamber with a silvery glow that reflected gently off the pod's insulated shell. Azalria lifted her hand inside, her palm pressed lightly against the inner wall as she whispered, "This is where it began." Ethan moved beside the pod, his eyes scanning the circular architecture, the curved panels, the older calibration symbols etched faintly into the metal. "This wing was part of the original test facility before the collider was expanded," he said. "It was used for early resonance experiments." Azalria nodded, her expression softening with understanding. "My people sent signals into space long before I was born. Not words, not images, pure resonance. Our kind believed the universe responded through patterns, not language." Ethan exhaled slowly. "You think those signals reached Earth? Reached this facility?" She closed her eyes briefly, sensing the vibrations around them. The first researchers must have captured a faint tone, something they did not fully understand. They built their machines using that pattern, not knowing it was part of my people's resonance. Ethan stepped closer, feeling the gentle hum travel through the floor and into his boots like a soft electric warmth. So the collider was built on a blueprint it did not know it was following. Azalria opened her eyes, the golden light in them steady and clear. "Yes, and when I stepped inside its chamber, it recognized the origin of the tone it carried for decades." The hum deepened, the lights lowering to a softer glow as if the room itself leaned toward her presence. Ethan released a slow breath. "It is not chasing you. It is returning to what it was built from." Azalria let her hand fall to her lap inside the pod, a quiet calm settling over her. It was never hunting. It was reaching back to its beginning. A soft pulse radiated from the center of the chamber, not loud or urgent, but gentle, a single note that washed over them like a warm breeze. Ethan felt the tension in his shoulders ease, the air around them lighter now, no longer pressing but holding. Azalria's voice softened further. "It has achieved resonance. It does not need to follow any longer." Ethan stood still, listening as the hum in the walls slowly dispersed into silence, the lights settling into their natural glow. The containment pod's insulation adjusted back to a neutral state, the shimmer fading. "Is it finished?" he asked quietly. Azalria nodded. "It understands. And now it rests." Ethan opened the pod's exterior latch, helping her step out gently. Her silver blue skin reflected the chamber's soft light, her movements steady, balanced. "Thank you, Ethan," she whispered, her voice carrying a quiet sincerity. "You carried me away from fear, even when the machine reached for what it remembered." Ethan held her hand for a moment, grounding her, grounding himself. "You do not have to face it alone," he said. Azalria looked toward the silent walls, their glow no longer tracking, no longer calling. The collider has found its origin, she murmured. And in a way, so have I. The chamber fell still, the last faint echo fading into the quiet, leaving only the soft reflection of light in her eyes, warm and human in a place that had finally learned to listen.